All right, so Grandpa, tell me about the time that Grumbo, great grandpa, went to jail for moonshining, and why uh, great grandma had to go to work at age 12.
Okay. Yeah. Now, my mother was a woman who loved everything she did. I mean, especially if it involved people. My mother was really a unique individual. She loved school. She really did. And so she impressed that so much on me before I was going to school. She told me how I was supposed to behave, how I was supposed to fold my hands in front of me and cross my ankles and all of that, and how I was supposed to behave. And then when I would come home from school in the first couple of grades, I would have to read to her every night, but I couldn't. My mother was a very dramatic woman. I couldn't just read the words. I had to read with feeling, because, you know, just reading the words, that's not right. You have to read it with feeling. She loved school, but she herself only got to go to the sixth grade. Why? Well, right about the time she finished sixth grade, my grandfather got arrested and put in jail for 6 months for moonshining. This was during Prohibition. He was making some bathtub gin and he was selling, and they caught him. They put him in jail. Well, now the family needed to be supported. Of the living children, my mother was the oldest, so she had to quit school. Now, at the age of 12, my mother was already at her full height. She was 5'6" then, and she was already developed like a woman. So she went down to Kelly and Jones, the factory, later to be called Walworth, and she told him she was 16 and she got a job down there. Well, my mother liked everything she did. Even as much as she liked school, she loved working at Kelly and Jones. Now, she did a job that would have made me crazy. She worked on an assembly on a core line. Now, what she told me her job was, these cores would come down a conveyor. Now, I don't know what a core is, but it's apparently some kind of a metal product. Okay, now she and the other girls that worked on that conveyor, they would grab these cores and they would sort them into various boxes. This core goes in that box, that goes, and so forth. Well, that would make me crazy, but to my mother, that was fine. And the thing she really liked about it was, then she could converse with all these other girls on the line. She loved anything like that. So that was her job, and she worked at it until after she married my dad, and she was pregnant with me. She worked at Kelly and Jones. Now, she would every week she would bring her pay home to Nunny, and Nunny would give her a quarter. Yeah. So yeah, but my mother, that's what happened to my mother. But my mother enjoyed everything. It didn't matter. The things that would have made me crazy, my mother was happy with. And I might as well throw in a couple of stories. But see, my mother was she was a very funny person. Now, she could be very funny when she was trying to be funny. She could also be very funny when she wasn't trying to be funny. Now, for instance, when I was a little boy, about 4 or 5 years old, I'm not quite sure how old, she took me to see the movie The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, the reason she took me to see The Hunchback of Notre Dame is she thought The Hunchback of Notre Dame was a football story. The movie scared the hell out of me.
She thought the Hunchback was a position in football.
Yeah. To my mother didn't know anything about football, so she figured she knew Notre Dame and that was football. Of course, it wasn't the same Notre Dame, you know. but she figured the Hunchback must be some position in football.
It's Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's right. So she took me to see that. Scared the hell out of me. And when I was in a scary movie when I was a kid, I would always put my thumbs in my ear when the scary parts came on, and I put my forefinger over my eyes. And I still remember that. and then another story I can tell you about my mom. This is many years later. When I'm married, and my family comes home to visit my mother. And I'm asking her what's happening in the family, and she's telling me, and then she says, "Oh, and your cousin Angelo bought a massage parlor." Now, to my mother, a massage parlor, that would just be a massage parlor, because my mother was naive. But I said, Mom, I don't think so. I don't think Angelo would buy a massage parlor. She said, well, I don't know. That's what they told me. They said he bought a massage parlor. Well, a few weeks later, I happened to see Angela. I'm talking to Angela. I said, you know, my mother told me something strange. She said that you bought a massage parlor. He said, no, why would I do that? I don't know. It's what she told me. I said to him, well tell me, have you bought anything recently? He said, well, I bought half interest in a body shop.
Body shop.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
And my mother was funny. She was very dramatic. For instance, if my mother wanted to tell you about having gone to a wedding and some little girl was dancing at the wedding, she wouldn't just tell you that. She would dance like the little girl.
Oh,
yeah. She was funny, and she was a lot of fun to have around. I could not have had a better mother. Now, she also thought anything that belonged to her had to be, anyone that belonged to her had to be the best. Like, she thought my dad was the handsomest man in the world. Well, my dad was nice looking. God, he wasn't the handsomest man in the world. And now, and then one time, well, let me tell you about your dad getting born. All right, when your dad was born, he did not look good. When your dad, now, when he was a couple months old, he was a beautiful baby. But when your dad was born, his chin hadn't come out yet. It was, and he had long fingernails when he was born. He had scratched up his face, all up. And my wife Nancy was a realist. Now, from the hospital bed, we called my mother, and Nancy said to her, tell her about the baby and everything. And she said, but Mom, he's not that good looking. And my mother said, oh, yes, he is. He's a beautiful baby. Yeah, if it was hers, it had to be the best.
He turned out all right, though.
Oh, yeah. Actually,
and he made some good-looking kids, I must add.
Oh, not only that, but, yeah. Not only that, but by the time your dad was a couple months old, he was a beautiful baby. But not initially. In fact, of my 4 kids, David didn't look so good because he was born and he was jaundiced, so he didn't look so good for a while. He looked fine after a while too. And Sarah, I'll have to tell you that story later. Sarah had to be taken at 7 months because they found out Nancy was diabetic. So she was in an incubator. She was born without eyebrows and so forth. And in fact, when her sister Susie saw her, she said that she looked like someone who came from Mars. But the one baby who was actually very beautiful at birth was Susie. Now, when your dad was born, when I'd go to the hospital, they'd always have him in the back row. Yeah. Susie always was put in the front row. She had the black hair, and she was beautiful. And they would put a bow in her hair. And I'd be standing outside the window there, and people would come up, and they would say, oh, look at that beautiful little girl. And I'd always say, that's my daughter. Yeah. Susie was beautiful from the start. The rest of the kids...
Took some time.
It took a little time, but they all turned out to be quite attractive. All good-looking kids. Yeah.
That's funny.
Anyhow, yeah, my mother was a unique individual. Yeah, let me tell you another thing. Like in his older years, my mother should have been an actress. In her senior years, she used to go around to the senior centers and malls and stuff with her friends, and well, she'd sing, and she also did a Tiny Tim imitation. yeah, tipped through the tulips, playing a ukulele. Yeah.
God bless everyone.
No, not that Tiny Tim. You don't know the Tiny Tim I'm talking about.
Oh.
There was this guy that was called Tiny Tim who sang in a falsetto voice back in about the 1950s.
Oh.
And his main tune was Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
Okay, I know that song.
Yeah, and she would do that. She would do that number. Yeah. Very funny lady. Very well. She couldn't have been nicer. It'd be impossible to have a better mother than that. All my friends loved her. In fact, my friends always hung out at my house because my house was just the nicest place to be. All my sister's friends always came to our house, you know, largely because of my mother. Everybody, you had to love my mother.